The warning lights flashed across the bridge of the UES Defiance. Captain Alan Wright grabbed the edge of his command chair as the ship's sensors went wild. Something big had just entered the solar system, bypassing all of humanity's early warning systems. "Report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension building in his chest. Lieutenant Olivia Martinez, his tactical officer, worked quickly at her station. Her fingers danced across the display as she analyzed the incoming data. "Sir, multiple objects just appeared near Saturn's orbit. They're moving fast using some kind of propulsion we've never seen before." "How many?" Wright asked. Martinez looked up, her face pale. "Over 500 vessels, sir. The largest ones are about 3 times the size of the Defiance." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The year was 2157, and humanity had expanded throughout the solar system with colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan. But despite this growth, Earth's United Defense Force consisted of only 24 warships, 24 against 500. "Open a channel to Admiral Howard," Wright said, "and put the unknown fleet on screen." The main view screen flickered to life, showing a vast armada of sleek silver ships moving in perfect formation. They looked like predators, streamlined, deadly, and completely alien. "Captain Wright." Admiral Gregory Howard's face appeared on a side screen. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than usual. "I assume you're seeing what we're seeing." "Yes, sir. Over 500 unknown vessels. They've bypassed our deep space detection grid somehow." "All EUDF ships are being called back to Earth," Howard said. "We need to present a united front while we figure out what we're dealing with." Wright nodded. "The Defiance will be there in 6 hours, Admiral." As the communication ended, Officer Ben Fuller turned in his chair. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel of the unknown fleet. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Wright ordered. The view screen changed to show a humanoid, alien with pale blue skin, elongated features, and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, its mouth moving slightly out of sync with the words. "I am Supreme Commander Zextral of the Viridian Collective. Your solar system is now under our control. We require your resources and will allow your species to serve us if you demonstrate proper submission." Wright stepped forward. "This is Captain Alan Wright of the Earth United Defense Force. Your unannounced entry into our solar system is considered a hostile act. State your intentions clearly." The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Intentions? To take what we want, of course. Our scans show your civilization has barely left its cradle. We've conquered 17 species more advanced than yours." The camera view widened, showing the vast bridge of the alien vessel, at least 3 times larger than the Defiance's. "We have detected your entire defense fleet. 24 ships." Zexatral made that laughing sound again. "My flagship could destroy them all without assistance, but I am not unreasonable. You have 72 of your Earth hours to surrender formally. After that, we will take what we want by force." The transmission cut off abruptly. Wright turned to his crew, whose faces showed a mix of fear and determination. "Set course for Earth maximum speed. We need to join the rest of the fleet." The emergency meeting at EUDF headquarters in Geneva brought together Earth's military leadership. Large screens showed the approaching alien armada, now parked just beyond Mars's orbit. Admiral Howard stood at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented threat. This Viridian Collective has technology far beyond our own, and overwhelming numbers." Intelligence Officer Daniel Scott stepped forward. "We've analyzed what data we have. The Viridians appear to be a conquering species that moves from system to system, stripping resources and enslaving populations. Their claim of conquering 17 other species seems to match patterns we've detected in long-range scans of nearby star systems." Chief Engineer Samantha Kelly raised her hand. "Sir, we've studied their ship designs from the limited scans we could get. Their vessels appear to use a form of quantum field propulsion, explaining how they bypassed our early warning systems. But there's something interesting. Their shield configurations have a fluctuation pattern at specific frequencies. Captain Wright, sitting near the front, leaned forward. A weakness? Potentially. Kelly nodded. Their shields are incredibly strong, but they appear to have harmonic vulnerabilities. If hit with the right frequency at the right moment in their cycle, they might collapse temporarily. Communications specialist Peter Daniels stood next. We've managed to intercept and partially decrypt some of their internal communications. They're extremely confident, almost to the point of arrogance. They refer to us as pre-spaceflight primitives despite our colonies. They're particularly dismissive of our fleet size. Admiral Howard looked around the room. Any strategic suggestions? The room fell silent until Captain Wright stood up. Sir, they're expecting us to either surrender or make a desperate last stand around Earth. Their overconfidence is a weakness we can exploit. I have the beginnings of a plan, but it's risky. At this point, Captain, risk is all we have. Let's hear it. Wright moved to the tactical display. They've seen our fleet size, but they don't know our capabilities. Dr. Eliza Grant's Quantum Disruptor Project. Is it operational? Dr. Grant, a small woman with intense eyes, looked surprised at being addressed. The prototypes work in lab conditions, but they're unstable and haven't been field tested. They're months away from deployment. We don't have months, Wright said. We have 3 days. Can your team install prototype disruptors on our ships in that time? That's impossible, Dr. Grant started, then paused. But if we stripped away the safety protocols and accepted a 30% chance of our own systems being affected, maybe. Admiral Howard frowned. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? A strategy based on something they clearly don't expect from us. Complexity and coordination, Wright said. They see us as primitive, so they expect primitive tactics. If we can equip our ships with Dr. Grant's disruptors and develop a battle plan they won't anticipate, we might have a chance. Lieutenant Martinez, who had accompanied Wright to the meeting, stepped forward. Sir, I've been studying historical battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones. There's a pattern we could adapt to space warfare. She moved to the tactical display and quickly outlined a series of maneuvers that made several senior officers raise their eyebrows. That's never been attempted in space, one Commodore objected. Exactly, Martinez said. That's why they won't see it coming. Admiral Howard studied the display for a long moment. The room was silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Finally, he looked up. We have 24 ships against 500. Conventional tactics means certain defeat. He straightened his shoulders. Captain Wright, Lieutenant Martinez, you have my authorization to implement this plan. Dr. Grant, you'll have every resource you need to get those disruptors operational. He looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, in 72 hours, we either preserve our freedom or lose everything. Let's make sure it's the former. As the meeting broke up, Captain Wright caught Lieutenant Martinez by the arm. That was good work in there. She nodded, her expression serious. Thank you, sir. But will it be enough? Wright looked at the tactical display, still showing the overwhelming Viridian fleet. It has to be, because right now they're laughing at our tiny fleet. Let them laugh, Martinez said quietly. They don't realize yet that it will be their doom. The next 48 hours on Earth were a blur of activity. Admiral Howard had named their desperate plan Operation David, after the biblical underdog who defeated the giant Goliath. The 24 ships of Earth's United Defense Force were rushed to orbital docks for emergency modifications. Captain Alan Wright stood in the main engineering bay of the UES Defiance, watching as Chief Engineer Samantha Kelly directed her team in installing Dr. Grant's experimental quantum disruptor technology. Sparks flew as technicians worked frantically to integrate the untested systems. How's it coming along? Wright asked, stepping carefully around cables that snaked across the floor. Kelly wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. We're at about 70% completion, Captain, but I have to warn you, these systems are highly unstable. In the lab, they worked maybe 7 out of 10 times. The other 3 times they either failed or caused feedback that damaged our own systems. Those aren't great odds, Wright said. No, sir, they're not, Kelly agreed. But Dr. Grant thinks she's found a way to improve stability by linking the disruptors to our main power grid in a new configuration. It's risky, but it might bump our success rate to 8 out of 10. Wright nodded. Do whatever you need to do. We can't afford to fail. On the other side of the ship, Lieutenant Olivia Martinez was working with her tactical team to program new battle formations into the ship's computers. The strategies she had developed were unlike anything in standard EUDF training manuals. These maneuvers will put extreme stress on the ship's structural integrity, warned Lieutenant Paul Evans, one of her team members. I know, Martinez replied, without looking up from her console. But standard tactics will get us all killed. The Viridians expect us to behave like prey, predictable and panicked. Instead, we'll give them something they've never seen before. She pulled up a simulation showing the 24 human ships executing a complex series of movements that looked chaotic at first glance, but actually followed a precise mathematical pattern. Each ship has been assigned a specific role, she explained. Some will act as bait, others as strikers. The key is timing. When the disruptors fire, every ship needs to be in exactly the right position. In another part of the ship, Lieutenant Commander Jason Miller was preparing Special Forces teams for possible boarding actions. 24 men and women in combat armor were gathered around a holographic display of a Viridian vessel. Intelligence has identified what appear to be command centers on the Viridian ships, Miller explained, highlighting sections of the alien vessel. If we get the chance to board, these will be our primary targets. Our objective would be to secure their computer systems and download as much tactical data as possible. A young soldier raised her hand. Sir, what do we know about their weapons? Not enough, Miller admitted. We have to assume they're more advanced than ours. Speed and surprise will be our only advantages. On the bridge, communication officer Linda Warren was developing a new encrypted communication system to prevent Viridian interception. The Viridians seem to use quantum entanglement for instant communication across their fleet, she explained to Wright when he stopped by her station. But our analysis suggests they don't encrypt their tactical signals the way we do. They probably never needed to, given their technological superiority over the species they've conquered. So they might not expect us to jam or spoof their communications, Wright said. Warren nodded. Exactly, sir. I've developed a system that should create enough interference to disrupt their coordination for short periods. Not long, maybe 30 seconds at a time. But in battle, 30 seconds could be the difference between victory and defeat, Wright finished. As the deadline approached, families across the solar system were evacuated to underground shelters. The colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan had been ordered to go dark, shutting down all non-essential systems to make them less visible targets. Admiral Howard called one final meeting of all ship captains. The mood was somber as the 24 men and women responsible for humanity's defense gathered in the secure conference room at EUDF headquarters. In 12 hours, the Viridians' deadline expires, Howard began. At that point, we expect them to advance toward Earth. According to our latest intelligence, they plan to target our major cities first, to break our will to resist. He activated a holographic display showing the positions of the human and Viridian fleets. Operation David will proceed in 3 phases. First, our fleet will appear to scatter in disarray, encouraging the Viridians to break their formation to pursue. Captain Wright has volunteered the Defiance to act as primary bait, appearing to flee directly toward the Viridian flagship. Wright felt the eyes of the other captains on him. The Defiance's role was perhaps the most dangerous. It would need to get perilously close to the enemy commander's ship. Second phase, Howard continued. Once the Viridian fleet has sufficiently dispersed, all ships will execute Martinez Maneuver Alpha, bringing us into position for a synchronized disruptor burst. The hologram showed the seemingly chaotic movements of the human ships suddenly resolving into a perfect attack formation. If the disruptors work as hoped, the Viridian shields will drop for approximately 15 seconds. During that window, all ships will fire everything they have at their designated targets. Captain Wright and the Defiance will target the Viridian flagship directly. And if the disruptors don't work? Asked Captain Frank Miller of the UES Intrepid. Howard's expression was grim. Then we fight anyway, and make them pay for every inch. The meeting ended, and the captains returned to their ships. As Wright walked back to the Defiance with Martinez at his side, he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "Do you think it will work?" Martinez asked quietly. "It has to," Wright replied. "There's no plan B." Back on the Defiance, Wright called the entire crew to attention over the ship's communication system. "Men and women of the Defiance," he began, his voice steady. "In a few hours we face the greatest challenge humanity has ever known. We are outnumbered and outgunned. By any conventional measure, our chances are slim." He paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of his crew. "But humans have never accepted the conventional. Throughout our history, we've overcome impossible odds through ingenuity, courage, and sheer stubbornness. The Viridians think they know what we'll do. They expect us to behave like every other species they've conquered, to be predictable in our fear." Wright's voice grew stronger. "We will show them how wrong they are. Every one of you knows your role in the coming battle. Trust your training, trust each other, and most importantly, trust that humanity is worth fighting for." As the crew returned to their stations with renewed purpose, Wright took his place in the command chair. On the main view screen, the deadline clock counted down the final hours before humanity would make its stand. Lieutenant Martinez approached his chair. "Sir, I've been studying records of previous Viridian conquests that we extracted from their communications. I noticed something. They always use the same attack formations. It's as if they've never needed to adapt." "Overconfidence," Wright said. "They've won so many times they don't expect to lose." "Exactly," Martinez nodded. "And that's what we're counting on." As the last minutes ticked away, the EUDF fleet moved into its starting positions, a seemingly disorganized pattern that hid their true intentions. To the Viridians watching from a distance, it would look like the humans had no coherent defense strategy. Wright took a deep breath. Soon they would find out if humanity's tiny fleet would be remembered as a footnote in yet another Viridian conquest, or as the force that brought an empire to its knees. The 72-hour deadline expired with a silent finality. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Alan Wright watched as the massive Viridian fleet began to move toward Earth in perfect formation. "All hands to battle stations," Wright ordered, his voice calm despite the tension gripping everyone on the bridge. Red alert warnings flashed throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their positions. Lieutenant Olivia Martinez monitored the tactical display, her eyes focused on the approaching enemy. "Viridian fleet is maintaining formation, sir. 500 vessels in a standard attack wedge. Their flagship is at the center of the formation." Wright nodded. "Right where we want them." He opened a channel to the rest of the human fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Wright. Operation David is now in effect. Execute Phase 1. Across space, the 24 ships of Earth's United Defense Force suddenly broke in different directions, as if panicking at the sight of the overwhelming enemy force. The Defiance itself appeared to turn and flee directly away from the advancing armada. On the bridge of the Viridian flagship, Supreme Commander Zexitral watched with amusement as the human ships scattered. "Pathetic," he said to his officers. "They didn't even attempt to form a defensive line. Break formation and pursue. Capture any ships you can. They may be useful for study. Destroy the rest." The massive Viridian fleet split apart, individual ships and small groups peeling off to chase the seemingly frightened human vessels. Just as Lieutenant Martinez had predicted, they maintained their standard pursuit protocols, following preset patterns they had used in countless conquests before. Back on the Defiance, Wright watched as the enemy fleet dispersed. "They're taking the bait. All ships continue evasive maneuvers. Maintain communication blackout except for emergency signals." The Defiance shuddered as a Viridian cruiser fired a warning shot across their bow. "They're trying to disable us, not destroy us," Martinez observed. "They want prisoners." "Good," Wright replied. "That gives us the edge we need." He checked the tactical display, watching as the Viridian flagship and its escort vessels moved to pursue the Defiance directly. "Status of the disruptors?" Chief Engineer Kelly's voice came through the comm system. Online but unstable, Captain. We'll get one shot at this, maybe two if we're lucky. One shot is all we need. Wright turned to Communication Officer Ben Fuller. Prepare the signal to the fleet. On my mark, we execute Phase 2. The Defiance continued its apparent retreat, allowing the Viridian flagship to close the distance. Other human ships were similarly leading their pursuers on carefully plotted courses that looked random, but were actually following Martinez's complex strategy. Wright waited until the tactical display showed exactly the right configuration. The Viridian ships had now completely abandoned their tight formation, spread out across space in their eagerness to run down the human vessels. Now, Wright ordered, send the signal. Execute Martinez Maneuver Alpha. Fuller sent the coded burst transmission. Across space, all 24 human ships simultaneously executed precise course changes that looked chaotic to observers, but followed a carefully designed pattern. Within seconds, the scattered human fleet had formed a complex three-dimensional web around the dispersed Viridian vessels. On the Viridian flagship, alarms began to sound. Supreme Commander, a Viridian officer called out, the human ships are executing some kind of coordinated maneuver. They're moving in patterns we've never seen before. Zexatral stood from his command chair, his amusement turning to confusion. Impossible, they were fleeing. It was a trap, another officer realized too late. They were leading us into position. On the Defiance, Wright gave the next order. All ships, activate quantum disruptors. Target Viridian shield frequencies. Throughout the human fleet, the experimental devices powered up. Blue-white energy built up around each human ship until they glowed like small stars. Disruptor at full. Power, Kelly reported from engineering, her voice strained. Stability at 82% and dropping. We need to fire now, Captain. Fire disruptors, Wright commanded. From every human ship, pulses of energy shot out in all directions, converging on the scattered Viridian vessels. The energy pulses passed through, space in wave patterns striking the Viridian shields at precisely calculated frequencies. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then across the Viridian fleet, shield systems began to flicker and fail. The perfectly timed disruptor bursts had created a cascade failure in their defensive systems, exploiting the harmonic vulnerability Kelly had identified. Viridian shields, down, Martinez reported, her voice rising with excitement. Reading shield failures across 87% of their fleet. Wright didn't waste a second. All ships execute Phase 3. Fire all weapons at designated targets. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. Missiles, energy cannons, and railguns fired in a coordinated barrage at the suddenly vulnerable Viridian ships. The Defiance itself targeted the Viridian flagship, where Zexatral watched in shock as his supposedly invincible shield systems collapsed. Impossible, the Viridian commander shouted as the first human weapon struck his ship. How did they know our shield frequencies? How are they coordinating these attacks? The Viridians struggled to respond, their perfect formations broken, their communications jammed by Officer Warren's encryption system. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they faced an enemy who had turned their own overconfidence against them. On the Defiance, Wright watched as their plan unfolded. Lieutenant Commander Miller, prepare boarding parties. We're going to breach the Viridian flagship. Miller's voice came through the comm. Team's ready, Captain, waiting for your go signal. The Defiance maneuvered closer to the damaged Viridian flagship, dodging return fire. Several other Viridian vessels moved to protect their commander, but were intercepted by other human ships following Martinez's battle plan. Sir, Martinez called out, I'm detecting power fluctuations in the Viridian weapon systems. Their main cannons are cycling down. They can't maintain combat operations without their shields. Wright nodded. This was the weakness they had hoped for. Take us in closer. Target their main propulsion systems. The Defiance fired another barrage, striking the Viridian flagship's engine section. The massive alien vessel shuddered, venting atmosphere and debris. Direct hit, Martinez reported. Their engines are damaged. They're losing power. Wright opened a direct communication channel to the Viridian flagship. Supreme Commander Zexatral, this is Captain Wright of the UES Defiance. Your fleet is scattered. Your shields are down and your ships are taking heavy damage. Surrender now or we will continue our attack. On the view screen, Zextral's face appeared, showing a mixture of rage and disbelief. How? How is this possible? You have only 24 ships. You made a critical mistake, Wright replied calmly. You judged us by our numbers, not by our capabilities. You expected us to behave like all the other species you've conquered. That was your doom. Before Zextral could respond, another series of explosions rocked his ship. The Viridian commander barked orders to his crew, trying desperately to regain control of the battle. Across space, the human fleet continued its precisely coordinated attack. Engineer Kelly's modifications allowed the human ships to perform maneuvers the Viridians thought physically impossible, evading much of their return fire. Launch boarding teams, Wright ordered. From the Defiance, small assault craft shot toward the damaged sections of the Viridian flagship. Lieutenant Commander Miller led the teams, their mission to capture the Viridian command center and access their computer systems. The battle continued to rage, with human ships darting between the larger Viridian vessels, striking with precision before moving to new positions. The Viridians, used to overwhelming enemies with their superior numbers and technology, found themselves unable to adapt to the humans' unconventional tactics. Captain, Martinez called out, the excitement clear in her voice. The Viridian fleet is starting to withdraw. Several of their ships are breaking off and retreating. Wright watched the tactical display, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. Across the battlefield, Viridian vessels were pulling back, abandoning their attack positions and regrouping at a safe distance from the human fleet. The tiny fleet that the Viridians had mocked was bringing them to the edge of defeat. 3 days after the battle, Captain Alan Wright stood in the observation deck of the UES Defiance, looking out at Earth below. The ship had taken heavy damage but remained operational. Of the 24 ships in Earth's fleet, 17 had survived. 7 had been lost with all hands, a painful cost but far less than anyone had expected when facing the Viridian Armada. The door slid open behind him, and Lieutenant Olivia Martinez entered, carrying a data tablet. She looked tired, but satisfied. Captain, I have the final battle report, she said, handing him the tablet. Wright scrolled through the information. The Viridians lost 176 ships, with another 93 severely damaged. The rest retreated back to their territory. He shook his head in amazement. We did it. We actually did it. Not just a victory, sir, Martinez pointed out. A decisive one. Intelligence reports that the Viridian Collective is in chaos. News of their defeat at the hands of our tiny fleet has spread throughout their empire. Wright set the tablet down. And Lieutenant Commander Miller's boarding mission? Completely successful. His teams captured the Viridian flagship's command center and downloaded massive amounts of data before the remaining crew managed to activate the self-destruct sequence. Miller and most of his team made it out in time. Wright nodded. The information, captured from the Viridian computers, would be invaluable. Already, scientists and military analysts were studying the data, learning about Viridian technology and the locations of other species they had conquered. And Zextral? Martinez smiled slightly. Captured, sir. He's being held at a secure facility in Geneva. Apparently, he's still in shock that his fleet was defeated. He keeps demanding to know how we knew about their shield vulnerabilities. Wright allowed himself a small smile. Some things should remain mysteries to our enemies. A week later, Wright and Admiral Howard stood in a large conference room at EUDF headquarters. Representatives from governments around the world had gathered to discuss humanity's next steps. The Viridians have retreated for now, Howard explained, to the assembly, but they still have a vast empire. They'll return eventually with a larger fleet and better prepared for our tactics. Then we must prepare as well, said the Secretary General of the United Nations. We need to expand our fleet, incorporate what we've learned from the captured Viridian technology, and establish better defenses throughout the solar system. A communications officer entered the room hurriedly and whispered something to Admiral Howard. The Admiral's eyebrows rose in surprise. Ladies and gentlemen, Howard addressed the room, we're receiving transmissions from multiple alien civilizations. They wish to establish diplomatic contact with Earth. The room erupted in surprised conversation. Wright exchanged a glance with Martinez, who had joined them for the meeting. It seems, Howard continued when the noise died down, that our victory over the Viridians has attracted attention. The 17 species previously conquered by the collective have begun rebellions of their own, inspired by our success. Several other independent alien civilizations are reaching out as potential allies. From nobodies to the center of galactic politics in a week, Martinez murmured to Wright. Not bad for pre-spaceflight primitives. In the days that followed, Earth established its first formal diplomatic contacts with other spacefaring civilizations. Representatives from the liberated worlds formed a coalition with humanity against future Viridian aggression. Admiral Howard led a delegation to what humans learned was called the Galactic Council, a loose association of advanced species. For the first time, humanity would have a voice in interstellar affairs. 3 months after the battle, the UES Defiance was repaired and upgraded with technology reversed engineered from the Viridian data. Captain Wright was summoned to Admiral Howard's office. Captain, Howard greeted him. Your ship has new orders. Earth is beginning to expand its fleet, incorporating alien technologies with our own innovations. The Defiance will lead an expedition beyond our solar system to establish formal relations with our new allies. Wright accepted the data crystal containing his orders. It's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short time, sir. Howard nodded. 3 months ago, we were alone in the universe, with a fleet of 24 ships that seemed inadequate even to defend our own system. Now we're building an interstellar alliance. As Wright turned to leave, Howard added, By the way, Lieutenant Martinez has been promoted to commander. She'll remain as your executive officer for this mission. Her tactical innovations have become standard training in the fleet. She deserves it, sir. We wouldn't have survived without her. Commander Olivia Martinez was waiting when Wright returned to the Defiance. I hear we're going to the stars, Captain, she said with a smile. That we are, Commander, Wright replied. The first official human diplomatic mission beyond our solar system. We'll be visiting the worlds freed from Viridian control, helping them rebuild and establish their own defenses. They walked together through the corridors of the ship, where crew members were preparing for departure. There's something else, Wright added. Intelligence Officer Daniel Scott made a discovery in the Viridian data that hasn't been made public yet. The real reason the Viridians attacked Earth wasn't just our resources. Martinez looked at him curiously. What was it then? Ancient. Records indicating Earth contains a powerful artifact from a long-extinct civilization. The Viridians have been searching for it for centuries. According to their legends, it holds the key to technologies far beyond even their understanding. Do we know what this artifact is? Or where it is? Wright shook his head. Not yet. But that's another part of our mission, to find out what the Viridians were really after, before they come back looking for it. 2 days later, the UES Defiance prepared to depart Earth orbit. In his quarters, Wright reviewed the mission parameters one last time. Earth was building more ships now, incorporating the best of human innovation with technologies shared by their new allies. The 17 liberated worlds were forming a defensive coalition, with Earth as a key member. Dr. Eliza Grant's quantum disruptor technology had become the foundation for next-generation defensive systems being installed throughout the solar system. Chief Engineer Kelly had been promoted to head a new division dedicated to adapting alien technology for human use. On the bridge, Wright took his command chair as the crew prepared for departure. The stars awaited them, no longer distant points of light but destinations. Course laid in, Captain, the helmsman reported. Ready for departure. Communications, send our status to EUDF Command, Wright ordered. Message sent and acknowledged, sir, replied Officer Fuller. Admiral Howard sends his regards and wishes us good hunting. Wright nodded. Very well, take us out, half power. Once we're clear of Earth orbit, prepare for our first faster-than-light jump. As the Defiance moved away from Earth, Wright thought about how quickly everything had changed. A few months ago, humanity had been confined to one solar system, with a fleet the Viridians had mocked as tiny and insignificant. Now humans were stepping onto the galactic stage as equals. "Ready for FTL jump, Captain," the helmsman announced. Wright looked around at his crew, then at the stars shining on the view screen. Among those countless points of light were new friends, new enemies, and new mysteries waiting to be discovered. "Engage," he ordered. The Defiance leapt forward, leaving Earth behind and carrying humanity into a future no one could have imagined before the day a tiny fleet had turned the tables on an empire. In the quiet of his mind, Wright knew this was just the beginning. The artifact the Viridians sought was still out there somewhere. The collective would regroup eventually, hungry for revenge. And beyond known space, other civilizations waited, some friendly, some hostile, none expecting the ingenuity and determination of the species that had transformed from prey to power in the span of a single battle. The journey ahead would be dangerous. But as Wright watched the stars streak past on the view screen, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity was ready.